The Kansas City Royals. They are a bad baseball team. They are deep in the heart of a tank and there is little to look forward to in their short-term future. I know what you're expecting, the typical song and dance, I point and laugh at their failure and bleak future, but when you look further, that would be the wrong reaction. What the Royals are dealing with are merely the realities of Major League Baseball. It's been long realized that there are two completely different playing fields in the majors. There is the upper class, your Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox, Cubs, Nationals, the sort like that. Then there are your less fortunate franchises. They're pretty easy to identify. The Athletics, the Rays, the Reds, Twins, Brewers, Royals, and a few others. The small market is a rough life on the steps, traveling from market inefficiency to market inefficiency, scrounging the dirt for developable players and table scraps from the big teams. Once in a brief window, they will sneak into the city sewers below and emerge into the light at a chance to bask in glory. After that, they must accept the window is closed and be banished back to the abyss. To baseball, they are criminal scum and must be stopped. Or pay with their blood. It's at this point where I must admit I've grown up a fan of one of these small market teams, so there will probably be some bias and visible resentment. You have been warned. The Royals were merely one in many windows that were crushed by several realities. The lack of a hard salary cap in baseball, exponentially rising costs of running the teams, and eventualities of their once young players demanding to be paid accordingly. Kansas City hit this wall in 2016 and 17. For the small market teams, they cannot simply sign every single player that's due an extension. They must pick and choose. There were 5 big players as part of their core in Eric Hosmer, Mike Moustakas, Salvador Perez, Alex Gordon, and Lorenzo Cain that were gunning for big contracts during this time. The Royals only came out with Gordon, who was in his early 30s and had the risk of declining, and Perez, who underwent Tommy John and may never be the same. They offered contracts to Hosmer and Cain, but were rejected for 2 teams on the other end of the small market window, San Diego and Milwaukee. Moustakas ended up coming back, but that was only because he didn't get any good offers. He came back on a 1-year deal to be dealt to Milwaukee as well. With 3 of the main pieces of their core gone, the Royals' window was officially shut. They fell to shit and now must endure another long rebuild that will hopefully get them back to the promised land. That's why you can't make fun of a team like the Royals, for this is what every small market team must come to terms with. You can mock all of the questionable moves they have made, you could snooker them losing the majority of their core for next to nothing, but it's hollow. This is their reality. They must make the most of their short-term window and then start over in the hopes that they can get back to their old form. Kansas City, for what it was worth, saw that they wouldn't succeed and have chosen to do a deep dismantling. The cycle will continue. For how long? Who knows? It could be brief, it could take much longer. There are rebuilds that have failed for a decade or longer. Just look at the Royals throughout the 90s and 2000s. They were a walking joke of the league. A team that couldn't develop players, and when they did, they gave them away for next to nothing due to organizational cheapness. That is the risk they take. I kept hearing the narrative in the early part of this decade that baseball was never healthier. On the surface, yes, but that was because the smaller markets found new ways to play. The way they must contend is with the farm system. They must draft wisely, they must develop with efficiency, they must trade to get young players who could thrive in their system, and they must identify and then capitalize on the controllable years of their core players. In the older days, there were plenty of loopholes to exploit. Type A and Type B free agency awarding compensatory draft picks to teams. Big market teams focusing on the sexy stats like batting average, wins, saves, and home runs. Being the few teams investing heavily in player development and international signings. The Moneyball era for the Oakland A's were experts at such discoveries, taking on the alleged trash of one team to reform them to suit their needs. The problem with these old loopholes now are obvious. The big market teams have gotten significantly smarter. We are no longer dealing with the Ned Collettis, Omar Minayas, and Bill Bavasis of the GM world, men who would sacrifice top prospects for marginal additions. The big market teams have become the cutting edge of the baseball world. They have not only fully embraced analytics, but are uncovering newer and greater advantages than the smaller markets ever could. Remember when things like shifting and pitch framing were considered revolutionary? 5 years seems like an eternity now. Today, the focus is on spin rates, launch angles, exit velocities. The data extracted is unlike anything we've seen before, but it's teams like the Dodgers and Astros that are capitalizing on it. Compare this past deadline with previous ones. Only in a few circumstances were the big market teams willing to part with key prospects for rentals and key additions. They understand the risk assessment is far greater in the future than a better chance at an upgrade for now. The way the big market teams are not only producing quality ball players, but seemingly generating them out of an assembly line is awe-inspiring. The talent that the small market thrived on is being picked up by teams that have one thing they lack: money. Even their executives are fair game. Andrew Friedman, the wunderkind for the Rays, was delivered endless gobs of money and a near-infinite budget in Los Angeles. Farhan Zaidi, the former right hand of Billy Beane, poached by the Dodgers as well. Jeff Luhnow of St. Louis fame, plucked to mold Houston into an empire. more. Not only this, but the MLB hasn't been helping either. Type A and B free agency has been abolished for a universal system, international free agency has been soft-capped, draft picks have now been aggressively slotted. Yes, they have competitive balance picks, but those are just glorified lottery tickets where the compensatory picks once were. With every advance that a small market team may make, the big market teams can not only hone into it with precision, but with far more efficiency thanks to significantly larger budgets. Think of it as a mom and pop trying to compete against something like Walmart. The mom and pop may offer a more intimate experience, but the big boys have significantly higher funding and can aggressively price their hypothetical product to the point where the loan shop can't compete. At this point, there is only one viable option for them after their window closes. Tank everything and hope to be bad enough to accrue high draft picks. It's utterly disgusting and waters down the game, but it's their only true choice. They can't outbid the bigger teams for talent, so top draft picks are one of the only ways to build. They saw what the Astros and Cubs did with their tank brigades and want that for themselves. What's the only method of doing that? Lose. And lose a lot. You may ask if there's another way, and there is. Trying to embrace a windowless plan has been something a few teams have tried. It usually leads to disaster. Just ask the Orioles and Pirates how trying to balance between building and competing is gone. One's been beaten down to the point of a deep rebuild, the other may be nearing that point. The problem with this approach is that it requires near perfection in every facet, which is impossible to accomplish in the sports world. Bigger market teams may be able to get away with it once again because of significantly more resources. No such luck for the smaller squads. I've harped on a lot of disparity, but once again, that's reality. Look at the differences in contracts. For a big market team like the Yankees, Cubs, or Red Sox, they can effectively swallow or bury several bad contracts and still remain competitive. Boston themselves won a World Series last year despite eating tens of millions of dollars owed to Hanley Ramirez, Pablo Sandoval, and Rusney Castillo. You remember that name? He's buried in Pawtucket. On the other hand, one terrible contract can effectively doom a small market franchise. The poster child here, Joe Mauer, one of the great players of the late 2000s and elite contact hitter at a premium position. The Twins rewarded him with an outstanding contract. Several problems developed. Minnesota couldn't do anything to supplement Mauer during this time, and he suffered significant decline. He was forced to move away from catcher due to injuries, and his hitting regressed due to age. His contract became an albatross and hampered the Twins for years. Joey Votto is another example, albeit the worst is probably yet to come since he's under contract until he's 40. Chris Davis is, well, the newest specimen, and there is no way for Baltimore to bury him or buy him out unless they want Bobby Bonilla Day 2.0. The same occurs with trades. A team like the Dodgers or Cubs can trade away significant futures yet barely blink an eye as they will be able to replenish on the fly. If you could guess for the smaller markets, a bad trade can set them back years. You'd think I'm going to mention the Chris Archer trade, but I'll go further back. Bartolo Colon to the Expos. The whole trade makes no sense now, but you have to remember, the MLB was ready to contract them and their GM was Omar Minaya. He felt an ace would help them out and it became Colon. The franchise needed to be saved and they didn't know if there would be a tomorrow, so their best prospects were shipped off. That year they were mediocre to begin with and the trade only led to more mediocrity. Little did they know that not only would they still remain a team, but the prospects they gave up would only become Grady Sizemore, Cliff Lee, and Brandon Phillips, 3 all-star caliber players. Colon was eventually traded for El Duque, who wouldn't pitch an inning for the Expos. It was a terrible trade that not only hampered the Expos' future, but helped to force them to gut everything and blow it up several years later as the Nationals. None of that truly matters for the Royals, because to be completely honest, they're the lucky ones. They made back-to-back World Series appearances. Kansas City won a championship. No tanking in the world will take that ring away from them. Look at most of the other small market teams as of late. The Tampa Bay Rays have made the World Series once in this time frame. They got smacked by the Phillies and haven't made it since. The Oakland A's have been chasing after that rainbow for 20 years and they haven't gotten anywhere close to a World Series, not even winning a game in the ALCS. The Indians had a great chance to win a World Series, but they choked and kept their curse alive. The Pirates had their window and failed. The Orioles had their window and failed. The Brewers had a previous window that failed. This can be said about the Reds, Padres, Twins, and it keeps going. I know you're going to mention St. Louis, but they're a total outlier. They have had outstanding player development, ownership dedicated to fielding a competitive team, and fan support to ensure spending. Many of the other small markets lack one of these or more. Even then, the Cardinals have come just short of the postseason as of late. From the beginnings of this disparity, the majority of the success has been for the bigger markets, and nothing is going to change on that front. Obviously, there is something to fix it, right? Perhaps a hard salary cap? Not happening. The time for that to occur was in the early 90s, and the Players' Union would refuse to go anywhere near it. Punishing tanking with a draft lottery? Then what happens? All it does is make it more challenging for small markets since it's now a crapshoot. Take the small market owners to task and force them to invest more in their teams? And risk your job as commissioner? owner? Here's the problem with that. The Glasses, Nuttings, Sternbergs, and Lorias of the world are a detriment to baseball, but here's my opinion. Don't hate the players, hate the game. The MLB enables this kind of shit and has done so for decades. They're honestly content with this baseball economy since they make healthy profits from broadcasting rights and sponsorships. If I'm a small market owner, why should I complain? You simply collect revenue sharing and pocket around a couple million per year if you aren't stupid. Any extra profits from ticket sales are gravy. Why would they rebel? It's the safest, most efficient business enterprise they could want. And that's the quandary of this dilemma. These teams are not only held back by their owners' lack of monetary capital and player contracts, but the MLB as a whole. And honestly, to me, it feels like nothing will change since it appears the owners are content with this two worlds dynamic. Thus, you can only be like the Royals. Tank like hell and hope you get another shot or two in a few years. If that. Wandering the steppes in search of food and prospects. What a life. By now you should know all about the plight of the small market, both due to elements in and out of their control. It's a tough road, but it's one they all must go through. The eventual investments they make in the team need to be secure. They will need to ensure the confidence of their fans, and they will need to have the flexibility to do it anywhere in the baseball landscape. If not, their trade secrets could be compromised by hackers and competitors. It's happened before. Look at St. Louis's meddling in Houston's database a few years back. Call it their version of needing internet encryption. They need to make sure they're in control, and you can too with ExpressVPN. With server locations in 94 countries, you can be assured of fast speeds and state-of-the-art encryption no matter where you go or what you choose to buy. Be it a young prospect in AA or that new computer you've had your eye on, just one click is all you need to ensure online safety and anonymity. Over the past few weeks, I've been making some purchases for general upkeep around my house. A new lawnmower, replacing parts on my trimmer, the usual fun stuff involving the yard. When purchasing online, even on reputable websites, the fear of your information being compromised is a real threat. With ExpressVPN, I don't have to worry about that, since I know that my security, especially in the shopping realm, is their utmost concern. It's that extra layer of protection that gives me added comfort, even on some of the most traversed websites. You can feel this same sense of confidence for less than $7 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Feel the freedom of internet privacy and find out how to get 3 months of world-class protection free by going to expressvpn.com/utree or clicking on the link below. As I've mentioned before, having a VPN is a necessity in this new age of internet. Why not go for an all-star talent in ExpressVPN and assure yourself of protection in the future?